There are griefs that come like fire. There are griefs that come like wolves. There are griefs that come like the sea, slow, cold, patient, taking first the edges of a man, and only later the whole of him. I will tell you of Feldrin, son of Stone, brother to Haldor, who learned too late that sorrow is not a wound one carries, it is a country, and some who enter it do not return. They had fled Rivalis at dusk, though it might have been kinder to say the village had spat them back out in fear. 5 souls, one a child, and one stubborn donkey, and too little hope between them to share. The brothers led the company. Haldor, bearded braided with iron rings of his calling, a priest whose god had not yet abandoned him entirely, and Feldrin, broad of shoulder and square of jaw, the older by minutes, and the younger in gentleness by years. With them rode Jontal, a human knight of St. Yidris, mail rust speckled from long weather and longer campaigns. Phyrus, a warlock with starved hands and eyes that always seemed fixed upon some horizon none of the others could see. And Irish, a red-haired girl of 13 summers, freckled nose, bare courage, and the idiocy of the young, which so often masquerades as bravery until the night comes. Her donkey Bill had a sway back, a torn ear, and a far greater instinct for survival than anyone else in that unhappy company. They had brought warning to Rivalis before sunset. The dead were marching from the west. Not a handful, not a graveyard's tantrum, a horde. They came in clotted ranks through wheat that had turned black, and fields where the crows had long since learned to feed with haste. Corpses from old roads and shallow pits, from battle ditches and plague trenches, from nameless places where men bury secrets and then pray into the forgetting. The people of Rivalis had heard the warning with fearful ears of villagers everywhere, ears that hear truth as inconvenience until it's pounding at the door. Some packed, some argued, some called it panic, some accused the travelers of bringing the curse with them, but none offered to ride west and see. So the company left the village before the moon rose, skirting the low country and making for the foothills beneath the mountain range called the Sleeping Beast, whose hunched black ridgeline lay against the dark like some ancient thing too vast to wake, and too terrible to fully trust to sleep. They did not light a fire that night. They made camp in a shallow fold of earth beneath a wind-bent stand of pines where the roots clutched at the stone like gold fingers. Their air was knife cold. Breath rose in pale bursts. Bill the donkey shifted uneasily, rolling his eyes towards the west and stamping now and then, as beasts do when they smell what men deny. Feldrin sat on a fallen trunk, whetstone in hand, drawing it slowly along the edge of his axe. Haldor muttered prayers softly, more out of habit than hope. Jontal stood watch with his gauntlets off, warming his fingers beneath his arms. Phyrus stared into the dark, his lips moving in conversation with nothing anyone else wished to hear. Irish slept, wrapped in a wool blanket too thin for the cold, one hand resting on Bill's tether, as though that string were all that held the world together. No one laughed, no one sang. Even I, who remember songs from when the sun was young, would not have sung there. There are nights when the world listens too closely. The first sighing was not a groan, or the dragging of feet, it was the silence. The pines, which had whispered all evening, ceased. The crickets stopped. Bill raised his head, ears rigid, gave a small sound, his nose like a child trying not to cry. Then something moved at the edge of the dark, then many things. It came not as a charge, but as a closing, as if the night itself had chosen to thicken and take shape around the camp. Rotten faces, rag-hung limbs, jawbones clicking in useless hunger. A woman with no lower half dragging herself through the pine needles black with old blood. A man in a soldier's coat still clutching the broken shaft of the spear buried through his ribs. Children, too, though I will not linger there. The dead have no shame in their numbers. Jontal shouted first. Feldrin was already on his feet. Haldor rose with his holy symbol in one hand and a hammer in the other. Voice suddenly loud, striking flint from the dark with the same name of his god. Light flared from the priest's palm. Not bright, not enough, but enough to show the circle closing. "Form on me!" Jontal cried, and for a little while they did. The knight's blade hacked through gray necks and collarbones. Feldrin's axe broke bone and shoulder with brutal economy of dwarven work. Haldor's hammer pulped faces, each blow punctuated by prayer. Virus flung pale witchfire into the crowd, and where it struck, corpses burst in brief, guttering blue. Irish screamed, awake, and scrambled backward toward Bill, who was already jerking at the tether in animal panic. The dead did not care about courage. They did not care about formation. They fell and rose and crawled, and bit at boots, ankles, wrists. They came from the dark faster than steel could answer. Virus died badly. That is all right. Some truths deserve plain words. One of the dead lunged out of the trees and seized him from behind, while another caught his arm. He screamed once, more in fury than fear, as if offended the world would dare end him in mud. Then a corpse with half a face sank his teeth into his throat. His witchfire burst wild and white into the branches above. Then he was down, kicking, choking red into his collar, and the dead were over him. Jontil saw it and turned. That killed him. The knight broke formation for one heartbeat, perhaps to save Virus, perhaps because he had once sworn an oath that no companion would fall while he still drew breath. A noble instinct, a useless one. 3 zombies hit him at once, one from the side, one low, one from behind. He threw 2 off. Feldrin saw him drive his sword through one skull and still try to rise with another hanging from his back like a starving child. Then the dark swallowed him in grasping arms and dull teeth, and he vanished from the fight with the sound of mail being torn open. Bill snapped his tether. The donkey screamed a hideous human sound from his throat and bolted into the trees. Irish, no, Feldrin shouted, but she was already running after him. That is the curse of the young. They still believe love is faster than death. Bill, she screamed in the dark. The brothers tried to cut toward her, but the dead flooded in between. Feldrin hacked downward again and again, until his wrists sang with impact. Haldor shouted her name, once, just once. Feldrin glimpsed her red hair through the trees, bright as fresh blood in moonlight, and then the dark closed. Donkey brayed somewhere ahead. Then came a sound I have heard men carry for the rest of their lives, the sudden, wet scream of a beast finding the teeth meant for it. Irish screamed next. Not long, not twice. Feldrin roared and lunged toward the sound, but a corpse in priest robes threw itself upon him, and another dragged at his knee, and by the time he broke through, there was only black, wood, frost, and the frantic ringing of absence. Whether she died there or whether she ran farther into the hungry night, I cannot tell you. The dead do not return every answer. The only 2 things are certain. Bill did not bray again, and Feldrin never saw the girl after that. By then, Haldor was bleeding from 3 places. The priest had lost his hammer. His beard was soaked dark, where the dead hands had torn at his face and throat. Still he stood back to his brother, holy symbol lifted, voice ragged but unbroken. Go, Haldor shouted. Feldrin did not. I know this because I have stood beside men who loved each other enough to mistake defiance for salvation. Go, damn you, Haldor bellowed again, and light burst once more from his blood-slick hand, flinging back the nearest corpse in a ring of pale radiance. For a breath, only one, the dead recoiled, and then they fell on him. Feldrin turned in time to see his brother vanish beneath a tangle of grasping arms. Haldor's face appeared once between them, eyes blazing, mouth open what might have been a prayer, or a curse, or Feldrin's name. Then a corpse seized his beard, another his arm, another his throat, and the priest was dragged screaming into the heap. Something in Feldrin broke then, or perhaps something simpler happened. He lived. There is no glory in survival when it has become the ugly arithmetic of panic. He ran. He ran because the dead had closed around his brother. He ran because Jontil was gone. Virus was meat and the girl was swallowed by the dark. He ran because even dwarven pride bows before enough teeth. He ran until his lungs burned and frost tore at his throat, and the eastern sky began at last to gray. When morning came, he went back. There are men who would not. Do not mistake me. I do not praise them less. But Feldrin went. The dead had wandered on with the dark, west to east or east to west, chasing whatever call had first raised them. The camp lay trampled and torn. Cyrus was scarcely a man. Jonto lay in pieces, enough for prayer but not for pride. Bill was nowhere. Irish was nowhere. Haldor. Haldor had not gone far. He lay half under a pine, as if the dead had dropped him there when they tired of the work. His chest was open, one arm twisted wrong, beard torn, face strangely peaceful, except for the eyes, which were still open to a sky too empty for consolation. Feldrin knelt beside him. He did not weep then. That comes later. Sometimes grief is proud. It likes an audience of fewer trees. He took up his brother's body in both arms, though Haldor had always been heavier than he looked. Priests often are. They carry too many invisible things. Step by step, stumbling, bleeding, numb with cold and what remained of the night, Feldrin bore him back towards Rivalis. The village let him in because dawn had taught them what dusk would not. Smoke on the western horizon, bells ringing from the watchtower, wagons being loaded in haste. Fear at last made honest. No one stopped him. No one offered to help. That too is grief's first lesson. The world sees what has happened to you. Most step aside, as if mourning were a contagion. Feldrin buried Haldor outside Rivalis, beneath stoding ground where the grass grew in mean stubborn clumps. He dug with blistered hands. He lowered his brother down, wrapped in a torn cloak, because he had no shroud, and no patience for borrowed piety. He spoke no priest words. What use would they have been? Haldor had spent his life saying them already. When the grave was filled, Feldrin sat beside it until dusk, then night, then another day. He drank. He stayed in Rivalis because men in grief often mistake delay for purpose. He drank in the tap room while villagers whispered. He drank by the stable wall while carts rolled east. He drank beside the church of St. Idris while priests too frightened to leave pretended at order. His axe rusted at the edge, his beard went unbound. He slept in corners and woke with dirt in his mouth, and his brother's name in his ears. Then something came over him. That is how such stories are told by those standing at a safe distance. Something came over him. Grief does not come over a man. It comes up from under him. It loosens the earth beneath his feet until at last he mistakes fallen for decision. On the third night, Feldrin took a lantern and a spade and went back to the grave. He dug Haldor up by moonlight. No prayer stopped him, no villager dared. They watched from the shutter cracks and crossed themselves and thanked whichever god they still trusted that the madness was not theirs. He carried his brother's remains to the little harbor below the village, where his ship waited. A narrow dwarven coastal vessel, tar-dark hull, patched sail, built more for stubbornness than beauty. He laid Haldor upon the deck, with care that would have broken the heart of any god still inclined to look kindly upon the living, wrapped him in sailcloth, and pushed off before dawn. He did not choose a heading. He let the wind decide. That was how he entered the Sea of Sorrows. I have never trusted that sea, though it has given me many stories. It stretches eastward from Zamordia's coast in black, brackish breath, barren islands that keep their own counsel, and fogs that seem less weather than will. Men say time bends there, that memory softens, that compasses grow devotional and spin towards regrets instead of north. Some call it the last margin of the world. Sailors call it worse things, and quietly. Feldrin drifted into it with his brother's corpse at his feet. No interest left in living. At first he drank, then he spoke aloud, then he listened. The fog thickened around his little ship until horizon and heaven became the same pale wound. Black water slapped the hull with the patience of a creature testing bone. Haldor lay where Feldrin had set him, bound in canvas, features ruined by death and sea chill. And yet, on the second day, Feldrin answered a question no living mouth had asked. By the fourth day, he was holding whole conversations. I was not aboard that ship. Do not ask me how I know the words. Stories told often enough wear grooves into the world. I have walked enough sorrow to put my feet in them. Do you hear them? Haldor asked him. Feldrin, hollow-eyed and salt-stiff, turned towards the corpse, as though nothing were strange and being spoken to by what he had buried. Hear what? The bells beneath the water. There were no bells, only fog, only water, only the slow gnawing of a man's mind upon itself. But after that, Feldrin listened differently. He leaned over the rail. He frowned into the black swells as though some pattern almost rose there, if only he would shame himself enough to believe it. There are not bells, Haldor told him later. They are names. Whose? Ours. Everyone's. The sea keeps what sorrow loosens. Feldrin began to see things. Shapes below the surface, where no shape should move. Pale forms pacing under the water, parallel to the ship. Lights in the mist that vanished when approached. Once, a long dark island, with spires like fingers, though the chart he carried showed no land there. Once a child's voice calling, somewhere off the port side. And if you think he did not hear Irish in that cry, then you have never known the cruelty of a mind that uses love as bait. Haldor, Feldrin whispered one night, sitting cross-legged beside the wrapped corpse. Did she live? The corpse did not answer for a long while, then softly. There are places beneath the fog where all lost things go. That is not an answer. It is the only one you will get. Grief is a liar, but it is not a simple one. It does not always tell men what they want. Sometimes it tells them only enough. Enough to keep them listening. Enough to keep them from sleep. Enough to make the next madness feel earned. Feldrin stopped eating. He spoke to Haldor as he once had around campfires, tavern tables, and on the long roads between the weather. He argued, he laughed once, a small, terrible sound. He apologized for surviving. He confessed that when Haldor shouted for him to run, he had hated him for speaking like an older brother, and not as a man equally doomed. He confessed that he did not remember Jontel's face clearly anymore. He confessed he had dreamed of Bill's scream for 6 nights before the sea gave him new sounds to dread. And Haldor, or the thing wearing Haldor's silence, answered in pieces. There is no bottom where you think. The dead are lighter than regret. Do not look too long when the water starts to look back. And worst of all, I can show you. One evening the fog parted just enough for Feldrin to see far off the shape of something enormous beneath the surface. Not a whale, not a reef, something built, perhaps, or once alive, gliding below the skin of the sea with impossible patience. Around it moved smaller lights, sinking and rising like lanterns carried underwater by invisible hands. Haldor, Feldrin whispered. Yes? What is that? The place where sorrow goes when it is done with us. No sane man would believe that. No sane man sits for days on open water talking to his brother's corpse. But then Feldrin was far beyond sanity's last little dock. The sea worsened him. Or perhaps it merely agreed. He tied stones together with rope on the 7th day, not because he meant yet to die. Men rarely admit that even to themselves until the final motion has begun. He said they were ballast. He said the ship rode wrong. He said many things. The corpse watched. Fog crawled low and thick. The water was black as old iron. From somewhere beyond sight came a sound like distant chanting, or oars, or teeth on wood. Haldor's wrapped head had rolled slightly to one side, as if he was listening. You can almost see it now, the corpse said. Feldrin stood at the rail. His beard hung wild, his eyes were red-rimmed caves. In both hands he held a bundle of iron, chain, and stone wrapped in sailcloth, heavy enough to drag certainty down into silence. He balanced, barefoot, on wet timber while the ship creaked beneath him like a thing that knew it was being abandoned. What if I miss it? He asked. You have been missing it all your life. What if it isn't there? Then why have you seen it every night? And there, at last, grief completed its oldest trick. made the impossible seem less absurd than dawn. Feldrin climbed onto the rail. The sea below was without face, but not without invitation. In its shifting black, he thought he saw lights. He thought he saw the outline of hallways beneath the water, stone doors, and a road descending to a place where bells rang with swallowed names. He thought he saw Haldor standing there whole again, beard braided, eyes bright, one hand raised, not in warning, but in welcome. Perhaps he even saw Irish, her red hair drifting like weeds in the dark tide. Perhaps Bill. Perhaps every lost thing makes its own lure. He smiled then, not with joy, but with surrender. That is sometimes worse. He stepped forward and vanished into the sea of sorrow with his burden in his arms. The water closed over him. No one saw him rise. No vessel returned with news. Only the little ship drifted back months later, empty, tar dark, the sail in ribbons, corpses gone, the deck scored by salt and weather, something like fingernail marks near the rail. I have stood upon that shore. I have watched the fog move where Feldrin vanished. And now and then, when the tide is wrong and the air too still, one can almost imagine a dwarven voice beneath the surf, speaking patiently to someone who cannot yet accept that he is dead. So remember this, you who still have brothers and daughters and beasts that trust your hands more than your wisdom. Love can make martyrs, loss can make madmen. And sorrow, if given a ship, will always choose the deepest water. I am the last bard. I walk a world that has forgotten how to heal without first learning how to haunt. And I tell you this because somewhere, even now, the fog is rolling in over black water, and someone is beginning a conversation with the dead they should not finish.